Okay, thank you. I'll call this Committee of the Whole meeting to order. The adoption of the agenda, if I can have Councillors Bodner and Wells move the agenda. Is there any questions? All those in favor? That's carried. I assume there's no disclosures of interest with the water budget? Well, there wouldn't be anything from Bodner or Wells. They don't have city water out there, so. There's no staff reports, there's no correspondence. So we have one presentation this evening, Barbara Robinson. So I'm going to turn the meeting over to Mr. Bowles, and he'll take it away.
Sure. Thank you, Mayor and Council. Tonight, we have an education night prepared for you as Council on the water and wastewater budget with a focus of I&I. This is a pre-budget workshop for all intents and purposes. I really want to thank our Director of Public Works for putting this together and working with our consultant to do that. I'm going to suggest that tonight really isn't about the numbers. It's really about talking about how I&I and the water system works. We will have the opportunity to get into the numbers in the budget in 3 weeks on March 11th. Tonight is about education, and we know as staff that you as council are very educated in our water wastewater system. There's always things to learn, and we do encourage you to ask a lot of questions as we go through the presentation tonight. Barbara is more than happy to answer questions as we go through that. I guess on that point, let me introduce Barbara. I think if anybody's had a chance to do a little bit of research on her, you'll find she's had over 30 years of experience in water, wastewater, co-authored numerous works for provincial and federal standards. And I think as she presents tonight and you ask your questions, you're going to have an opportunity to see just how much roll up the sleeve kind of experience she actually has. She is somebody extremely qualified to answer probably just about any question you may have on water and wastewater, and we hope you enjoyed tonight. Barbara, I'm going to pass it over to you. Take us away and let us know how you want questions as the night goes on.
Absolutely. Thank you so much. Thanks for the introduction. Let me just pull my slides up, which always takes me 2 steps. Share screen. There you go. Sorry, I'm always a bit clumsy with this, so that's just the way it goes. From beginning. All right, are you seeing my slides?
Yes, we are.
Yes? Yes. Awesome. Okay, all I want to say in this first slide, well, actually I have 3 things I want to say. Firstly, you are the first municipality in Canada to hire Norton to do a webinar to a municipal council. And this is so important to me because you'll see pretty quickly that I think about nothing but sewers. But we need councillors to start understanding, like engineers, it's our responsibility to explain to council the kinds of things that are going on with sewers and I&I, so that you understand the complexity of the situation, because I&I really is very complex. Second thing I want to mention, all I'm going to say about myself is that my nickname in our industry, in the civil engineering industry, whatever, has been Norton for 15 years. And that is largely because I go into sewers a lot. I'm on site a lot, and that's fairly uncommon for someone with my amount of experience, but I don't know, I just love sewers, so I go in them. So Norton was named after Ed Norton of the Honeymooners, of course. Obviously, I was going to call my company that, so that's Norton. The last thing I want to say, I literally just started working with your staff 6 weeks ago, so I'm not really prepared to give a lot of details. We've talked about a lot more than we're going to show you tonight. You have some amazing staff. You've got a bunch of new people. You've got, Darlene's been around for a while. You have no idea. Half the battle is having keen staff who really want to make a difference. And I work with people across Canada, and I'm telling you, you have some keen staff here. So, all right. So today I'm just going to try to explain to you in somewhat general terms, but you'll find if you want to ask more detailed questions, I can answer them. I'm going to assume, I'm not insulting your intelligence. I'm going to assume you don't know all that much about I&I and sewers. because that would be my experience. And even if you know a lot about it, you might find that I can share some new information with you, so we probably won't go awry there. Because I'm not accustomed to speaking to a council specifically, it's a little bit hard to nail the level of detail I should go into. So I've asked, pardon me, I should have greeted Mayor Steele and members of council, my apologies. I've asked Mayor Steele to step in if I'm losing you, because he knows you better than I do. And once I start talking about sewers, I will forget to look at your faces. So, and then the other thing is I've kind of built in breaks every 4 or 5 slides. Like I'll give you a group of slides and then pause. We can always go back. If I start taking questions every slide, I'm going to have trouble getting through 30 slides. That's only 30 minutes, but I know sometimes we can get busy. So I'm just going to try and get the 3 or 4 or 5 slides in groups. I've kind of planned it ahead of time. I'm going to pause. We can go back and look at slides, talk about whatever you want. So I'm going to explain to you about sewers in general, tell you what I&I is, and give you some specifics. Again, I'm not sharing everything we've talked about at the staff level. But this is all I'm comfortable talking about now. And I just wanted you to understand the complexity and the enormity of dealing with I&I, not just Port Colborne, but the whole country. Okay, first thing, the term inflow and infiltration. So that's an engineering term. We don't need to use that term. Indeed, when I speak to non-technical people, I try to use the term clean water that should not be in there. Inflow and infiltration is simply clean water that's in your sewers that should not be there. Inflow tends to be a direct connection, typically from a storm. An inflow response is direct after a rainfall. An infiltration response takes time. So, pardon me, if I were to explain to you what that looked like on a graph, I'm an engineer, I love graphs. An inflow response is immediate and then goes away right away, whereas an infiltration response is slower but lasts for a long time. Different mechanisms, and as engineers, we treat these two things differently, but from council's point of view, it's all clean water getting into your sewers that we don't want in those sewers. So you don't need to worry about understanding the nuances, because inflow becomes like rainwater becomes infiltration after the storm. So they're just, they're engineering terms, don't worry about it. Clean water in sewers that should not be there. All right, so I'm going to scare you with a few slides, and then we'll go from there, and then I'll pause. So you all read the paper, you all listen to the news. We all know that we're seeing more extreme weather events. They're not quite showing up. I don't think they're showing up yet on our IDF curves in Niagara, but that's fine. Sorry, that's an esoteric detail you don't need to know. Anyway, extreme storms seem to be more common, and it appears they will continue to be so. Flooding costs are climbing astronomically, and dealing with I&I is no longer sort of a nice to have or whatever. It's kind of becoming essential, because the risks associated with allowing your system to continue to carry more I&I than is reasonable brings with it a lot of risks to your ratepayers, and of course we all want to protect ratepayers. Okay, so I kind of alluded to risks. So here we are. It's no longer good enough for a municipality to kind of not think about I&I or ignore it or whatever. It's just not going to be good enough in the future, because as you will see as I continue to speak, I&I is a very big thing. So I'm just telling you that municipalities are starting to be sued for not taking the appropriate action. And I'm not just talking about some astronomical, wastewater treatment plant complete failure, nothing like that. I'm talking failure to take actions like maintaining your sewer system. So I'm not a lawyer. Other people work on this kind of thing. I can just tell you, I get a lot of phone calls. I get calls from homeowners, developers, people who pay taxes are becoming aware that inflow and infiltration, flooding, which are directly related, are something that they need to campaign for. So actually, in this presentation, I'm basically going to tell you the same thing. I've got 30 slides or 32 slides. I'm going to tell you the same thing 32 times, just in a different way. So hopefully by the end, you'll catch my drift. Okay. So first of all, I'm going to explain a little bit more about what the sewers look like, and I'll go into some technical detail. But first of all, I just want you to imagine a sewer on a street in Port Colborne. The brown stuff is, that stuff that you guys don't like to talk about. That also contains some leakage, it also contains some groundwater and some rainwater that is normally expected in sewage, because sewers are constructed, and of course they're not ever built perfectly, and so a little bit of leakage is normal, and I've included that in the brown there. And this isn't there's no, this is just a visual, there's no percentage here that's related to your system. Now that blue slice, that's the clean water I was talking about. So there's groundwater and rainwater that should not be in the sewers. And the problem with that clean water, well, the problems with this are enormous. Because you're in a combined area where CSOs happen in Niagara Region, pardon me, I don't know specifically at the Port Colborne plant, the pressure on you is higher than, say, where I live in Kitchener, where it's a separated system. We're not sitting right on Lake Erie. So, you know, we have a bit more wiggle room. And I'll explain to you as I go along. First of all, I should have started with this. You guys have some I&I. There is no question you've got some I&I. I've seen worse. I know, you know, we need to deal with it, but it's not the worst I&I I've seen. Everybody in Canada is doing the same thing you're doing right now, trying to kind of catch up. You know, everybody's doing the same thing. So you're no different than anybody else. So please don't worry that you're behind the 8 ball. You're not. But I want you to remember this visual. I might come back to this slide. Just so the I&I is taking up space in our pipes. So if it takes up space in our pipes, that's capacity. And I know there's not a lot of development in Port Colborne now, but you know, eventually with I&I in the future, the pipes are going to need to be replaced. So let's keep the clean water out of those pipes to put off the day when we need to replace those pipes. And you can read the slide, but in some ways, the biggest cost of I&I is the fact that it causes us to need to replace pipes sooner. And a lot of your, well, let me just leave that going. I'll get to it when I get to it. All right, so I've mentioned that I obviously made the point on the previous slide that your I&I is costing your ratepayers money, and your ratepayers don't actually know that they're paying for I&I. So I'll talk about your rate structure a little bit later, but you know, I know in my community, the I&I is about 40% in a separated system. That's pretty high, but I just get a sewage bill every month and I pay it, and the rate, I forget what I pay, to $2.14 a meter cubed or whatever. That rate includes all the I&I that's in the system. So as a ratepayer personally, I'd rather the city spent some money removing the I&I and gradually reduce my rates. And I know what a terrible year to try and set a budget or decide on a budget. I don't envy your task at all, but I'm going to explain to you why I&I has to be a priority here. All right, sorry. I actually barely look at my slides. I just kind of talk about sewers, and there's pictures for you to look at. When I say it's so costly, what do I mean by that? A garden hose, an average garden hose is about 1 liter per second. Just to give you an idea of what 1 liter per second of I&I or any flow looks like. Now I see 1 liter per second sometimes in systems coming out of every single house on the street of I&I. It's not sewage because I can visually see the difference. 1 liter per second, it doesn't sound like much, but in terms of cost, it's a lot. So when I calculate the costs of I&I, and the industry doesn't agree with me completely on this, but that's okay. I calculate the dollar amount, the rate that the City of Kitchener charges me, that's City of Kitchener costs and Regional Waterloo costs, two-tier municipality, the rate that they charge me for sewage services, which includes collection, treatment, pumping stations, staff, overhead, utilities, you know, all of it. That's what it costs to deliver sewer services to my house. So I'm saying, well, that's what it costs then. The only problem with this assumption that my colleagues have a difficulty with is the corollary is not true, meaning if we remove 1 liter per second from your system tomorrow, we're not going to save $80,000 per year tomorrow because of efficiencies of scale. So it doesn't work in both directions, but the reality is the cost of providing wastewater collection, treatment, all of it is whatever you're charging your residents. Everybody works very hard to get the right rate for the residents. That's what it costs. So when we think about not doing it, I'm going to bring you back to this idea of, so let me put this another way. A full-time equivalent, an FTE, and I've never even mentioned this to your staff, I just thought of it today. A full-time equivalent, you could hire someone for $80,000 a year. And that person, if you had the right set of skills, could actually full-time work on finding and fixing I&I. And every year they would be paid for if they just found one garden hose. And I'm telling you, if you have someone to do that, you'll find lots of garden hoses. Now you have staff very keen on this, but I don't know. I'm not making a recommendation. I'm just saying often there is insufficient staff to do the work required to address I&I. So let me see. Yeah, there you go. Okay, so having told you all the risks and all the reasons why you absolutely have to address your I&I, you're probably thinking, great, how much is it going to cost and when do we start? Let's get rid of it all. And I'm here to tell you, we can't get rid of all your I&I. We can only get rid of, well, here's the next slide. There's a law of diminishing returns with I&I as with everything else. Don't look at the details of that graph. I just grabbed it off the internet, so it's not particular. Just trying to make the point. So when you start on an I&I program, you generally have easy, low-hanging fruit. Roof leader disconnection is a good example of that. That's a lot of water into your system, particularly during wet weather, which is of concern to you. And a roof leader disconnection is $300. Now, of course, you're an old community, postage stamp size lots. There's lots of reasons why that's not always possible. But I'm just saying, as you start to do more and more things with I&I, you get to the point where it's just not economically feasible to continue to try and reduce it. And I can't tell you, that point is in a different place for every single community. There's no standard way to look at I&I and decide the right number. You'll hear later, I've written guidelines and stuff. There is no magic number. It's going to be the magic number for your community. Because you sit on Lake Erie, no surprise, lake levels are high. It's going to affect your I&I. There's nothing we can do about that. We're going to have to work around that and find the easy wins to the point where we can't afford to fix it anymore. And then we're just going to continue with caring about I&I, but, getting out of the active phase of the program. And I have more to say about that, but I'm pretty sure I'm going to pause here. Oh yeah, this is just the last slide. So this is from a new standard we're just publishing. There are a lot of reasons why I&I is hard to fix, and most of them actually don't have to do with engineering directly. Like I&I isn't really an engineering problem. There's a technical problem and engineers know how to fix technical problems, but it's very complex. There's a lot of competing things going on with I&I, and some of those things have to do with council decisions. I mean, we all know sewers are buried deep and residents don't see them. And as long as they're not blocked, probably residents would rather see you build a library, or I know for certainly, because I was a city engineer, they'd rather see you pave a road than spend $1 billion on some sewers. So it's not easy to allocate money for sewers, but I hope I'll be able to convince you by the end of the presentation that I think it's very important. I think I got to pause here. Yeah. Okay, so I'm just going to pause for a second, grab a glass of water, and I don't recall if am I taking questions or is someone going to? Do you want to
take questions at your pause?
As you wish. I just don't have a sense of whether folks are following me or I'm losing them. So I was hoping the mayor would maybe help. But whatever you want, we can run the whole deck more or less. Okay. Mr. Bruno has a question. And by the way, my mic's doing something weird. I'm not sure what, so I can't hear you very well, but you know how this stuff goes. Mr. Bruno. Yes, sir.
Thank you, Barbara, very much. Could you define for me then extraneous flows? Is that the combination of both?
I&I.
Okay.
Extraneous flow is just another word for I&I. Extraneous to what should be in the sewer. Okay.
Can I challenge you on something?
Absolutely. Have at her.
When you say that we are not behind the 8 ball, could you put that in context in terms of other like-sized communities in Niagara, flows, what we're paying? Can you give me some context to that?
So, Councillor Bruno, I'm going to talk about that in great detail throughout the rest of the presentation. So I'm going to hold that question, and we can talk about it some more as I get into the actual costs that I'm going to talk about for Port Colborne, if you'll allow me. And then, pardon me, I don't have everybody's. Councillor Beauregard, did you have a question or?
Yes, I did. Through you, Mr. Mayor, to the presenter, Barbara. Actually, I have 2 questions. So, one, what's the typical lifespan or the average lifespan of a sewer?
I'm going to get to that through the. This is why I didn't necessarily want to do too many questions. I will tell you through the presentation, and if you don't have your answer by the end, I'll address the question.
Okay, that's fine. And the second question is, you mentioned that we're not the worst case scenario that you've seen.
Correct?
In the worst case that you've seen so far in your experience, how?
I never kiss and tell. I know about everybody's I&I in Canada because everybody phones me and talks to me about it. I'm not going to make that comment. And this is something I'm going to try to explain to you today. Worst is a relative term. You're sitting on Lake Erie. You're never going to be able to achieve very low I&I rates. I'm just going to make that prediction. It's not possible. You're going to do the best you can, like everybody else is doing, but there's no magic number. It's the magic number on the cost benefit efficiency curve, because I'm very interested in efficiency, and I'll talk some more about that. So
what was the cost in fixing that?
What is the cost? I have the cost for you. Just hang on.
Okay.
Let me just make sure there's no. Okay. Let me. So with the mayor's permission, I'll keep going with the slides. I think we're okay to keep going.
Yep, go ahead.
Again, we can always go back, and at the end, we'll go back to any slide you want. We can talk about it more. So now I'm going to talk a little bit about sewers themselves, like just this, not really technical, but I want you to understand what your sewer system looks like kind of underground. And I have two slides. They're showing the same information. They're both Norton sketches, and I make the worst sketches, but I'm just making a point here. So I'm going to show you two different slides, same information, just to give you a sense. Okay, so here's a cross section of a sewer system. So imagine that I'm at your house, in front of your house. I'm standing in the middle of the road, and I take a chainsaw that's twice the size of your house, and I turn it on and I find where your sewer lateral is, I slice through it, I push the other half of the earth away, and I'm now looking at a slice through your personal sewer system. So you'll see there that your sewer system leaves your house below the footing because it collects all the drainage from your house. And you can see here maybe that you probably know you have floor drains in your basement. They're directly connected to your sanitary lateral, which includes a risk of flooding, of course, but it's required by the building code. I'll talk about a clean out in the next slide. Most homes, I'm not sure in your area, I haven't worked down there too much, but most homes have foundation drains or weeping tiles. The purpose of those is to pull the water away from the wall of your house and direct it away from your house to keep the moisture in your basement down. I mean, most people's basements are moist, but your foundation drain system is actually designed to just pull the water away from your house. Up until about 1980, across Canada, certainly in Ontario around 1980, the regulations changed and it was no longer legal to connect that foundation drain to the sanitary sewer system because the foundation drain is actually collecting groundwater. We don't want groundwater in our sewers. The groundwater doesn't belong in sewers. So more recent applications are such that the foundation drain, typically these days it goes to a sump pump, and the sump pump pumps the groundwater, that's what it is, away from the house somehow, either to a storm or whatever. And I know you guys don't have storm sewers in Port Colborne, or don't have a consistent storm sewer system, and lots of other municipalities have the same problem. So that's not unusual. There are ways to get around it. You know, that's just the way it goes. Sorry, I got off on a tangent. So what I wanted to say here is that there's the private side lateral and the public side lateral. And the private side lateral just means that the homeowner owns that piece of pipe. It's a 4-inch PVC pipe, tends to be white, doesn't matter why. At the property line, it's a 4-inch PVC pipe, tends to be green, doesn't matter why. Your residents own the piece of sewer on their property, and you own, of course, the lateral on your property, as well as the actual sewer main and the rest of the infrastructure in the right of way. Now, the green stuff, the public side infrastructure, is under the jurisdiction of MECP, Ministry of, oh my gosh, I always forget, Ministry of Environment, Conservation and Parks. Those are the engineering guidelines. The private side, on the other hand, is governed exclusively by the building code, the Ontario Building Code, which is the Building Code Act, completely different. So the reason I'm making, well, there's a few reasons I'm making this distinction. First of all, the regulations governing these two sides are completely different. The people who work on these two sides are completely different because typically your engineers aren't working on the private side. So it just creates many complications. This isn't the model everywhere, but most of Canada, this is the model that the residents own their own sewers. But I'm going to tell you something else since we've got the slide up. So you guys all own, like I imagine most of us have a house. So imagine you're concerned about your family's safety. So every spring and fall, you probably check your smoke detector and you check your CO detector. Do you ever check your sewer lateral? Do you check your sump pump? Do you check your backwater valve? These are all this is protective plumbing equipment, just like your smoke detector is protective. It protects against fire. And we're going to talk a lot about public education, because of course people don't know that they own a piece of sewer. You might not have known that until today. So part of what we need to do, what I'm trying to do with Norton Engineering, is increase public understanding, which is why I do a lot of media. And I'll tell you one other thing, just for fun. If you have a toilet in your basement, I'm going to recommend you keep the lid on that toilet down. You might even want to put a brick on top, and I'm going to tell you why. As you probably know, rats, live in sewers. I see rats a lot in sewers. That's just where they hang out. Sewers have nutrients in them. Rats like nutrients. So sewers are around rats. Rats are around sewers a lot. Now, if you think about it, when you're not doing laundry or flushing a toilet or whatever, your lateral should be empty. It's just conveying your house plumbing to the street. It should be empty. If there weren't I&I, it would be empty. Now, a rat that hangs around in sewers can just walk up that empty lateral right to your basement. Now, your floor drains have a P, all your plumbing fixtures have a P trap on them. That's actually a water seal to prevent the gases from the sewer coming into your house. And now I'm talking like an engineer. Anyway, a rat can walk up. He can't get in your floor drain because it's too small, but a rat can easily swim through the trap in your toilet and get out into your basement. This is the thing, I kid you not. So just from a personal point of view, if you have a toilet in your basement, keep the lid down. There you go. Free advice. Okay. Same picture, just same lousy Norton graphics, because I don't care about graphics, I care about sewers. Trying to convey the same information, just in a different way. Perhaps this will be easier for some people to see. It's also a cross section, same thing. I did want to point out that sorry, I don't see the whole slide because your names are there. The sewer vent, I forget what I called it on here, the vent. Anyway, I wanted to mention, if you think about it, everybody has a 3-inch pipe coming out from the top of their house. That piece of PVC pipe, it's like usually a couple of feet tall, whatever. That is actually venting the public sewer system. So that's a 3-inch pipe. That's a big pipe. It actually vents the sanitary sewer from the street, and it's up high, so the odor from the sewer doesn't disturb people. Of course, you smell sewers sometimes, especially combined sewers, but that vent is there for a very important reason. So we need to connect what happens at the house with what happens on the street, and because they're different jurisdictions, different people, sometimes that's difficult to do. I also wanted to mention I'm going to say this many times, half of the length of your sewer system in general, and I haven't measured yours particularly, in general, half the length of your sewer system occurs on the private side of the property line. And half of it depends, but let's say half of your I&I is getting in on the private side of the property line. This is a challenging concept, and I'll talk more about that later. Residents need to maintain their sewer lateral. You maintain your roof, you maintain your furnace, whatever, you also have to maintain your lateral. So another pro tip, if your house is 60 or 70 years old and you've never had your lateral replaced, then your lateral is 60 or 70 years old. And it's probably, I don't know, may not be in good shape. I recommend you hire a plumber for $350 to run a camera through your lateral every 5 or 10 years, depending, just to make sure your sewer is in good shape, because nobody wants a basement flood. And if your sewer collapses, your personal sewer collapses, you're looking at basement flood. So that's kind of outside of what I was trying to show you today. The other thing I wanted to mention on here is the location of your water main in the right of way. So fun fact, the sanitary sewer is almost invariably located at the center line of the road. And the reason for that is when they build homes, if they skewed the sanitary sewer to one side, the lateral, the pipe from houses on one side of the street would have to go longer, and it would make the sewer go deep. Nobody wants deep sewers. The deeper it is, the more expensive it is. So it's more cost effective to have the length of the lateral equal and land in the sewer in the middle of the road. So when you're driving down a road and you see manholes in the middle of the road, pretty good chance that's your sanitary sewer. So again, that's just a fun fact. I think that's all I wanted to say here. And I think I'm going to pause again because I just gave you a lot of information about your sewers. So let me see. Yeah, next topic. So I'm going to pause. If any Mayor Steele or anybody would like to make some comments, it'd be helpful to know the level of detail. Am I being too technical? Are you guys following me? If you're not following me, just pause me and I can go back or say things a different way if that's necessary. No problem. I'm happy to speak at any level that's useful to you, your council.
Yep, no, Eric's
So
got
I'm gonna have a sip of water.
yeah, looks like Eric has a comment there.
Yeah, through your worship to the presenter, I just want to say that I really like the presentation you've given so far. It's very detailed, and it seems similar to the presentations we had in regards to just water in general, regarding about like private land and laterals and the responsibilities of the homeowner. So we got a little bit of knowledge on that, but I do appreciate what you've done so far.
Okay, perfect. Thank you very much. And don't be shy. My purpose here is to help you understand what's going on. If I'm losing you, then just stop me and we'll go back. Okay, perfect. So let me keep going. And again, we'll have time at the end. We can go through all of this 12 times, whatever we need to do. Okay, so I have to jump around a little bit because this is a complex problem, and I thought carefully about how to deliver this content, but there's so many pieces I have to put together, and I need to introduce them. It seems like it's not flowing very well. Trust me, just follow along, and at the end we'll get to the same place. Okay, now I'm going to talk about how we construct new sewers, and I understand that new sewers aren't a big part of what's going on in Port Colborne right now, but it would be great if they were, because of course development and development charges and tax revenue. So we need to be prepared for new sewers. And I'm talking about what happens when new sewers are constructed because it's affected our systems in Ontario for about 30 years, as far as I can tell. So let me back up. I've been talking about I'm talking about new subdivisions. I know you don't have them, but I need you to hear what I'm saying about what happens when we construct sewers. I discovered that new subdivisions were leaking, meaning excess clean water. More clean water was getting into them than was allowed by regulation, code, and standard. And I'll get to that in a second. Around here, I work locally, Regional Waterloo, Woolwich, whatever. So I've been doing that for a long time. I've been giving papers and saying, hey, all these new subdivisions, I'm flow monitoring, they're all leaking, what's going on? So then I opened Norton after I was city engineer for a couple of years. I started Norton. And I thought, well, you guys will have observed, if you haven't already, by the end you will, that I just more or less think about sewers all the time. So I thought, well, if the sewers around where I live, and different developers, different consulting engineers, different circumstances, and they were all leaking for different reasons, but they were all leaking. And when I say leaking, I mean more than allowable clean water was getting into them, brand new sewers. So when I started Norton, I said, well, I'm going to ask the industry in Ontario. I started in Ontario. Do you guys have any flow monitoring of new subdivisions that you can share with me? So and at that time, this was only 6 years ago, but nobody was monitoring new subdivisions as far as I know, except me. I'm not sure. Anyway, so 35 people got back to me. They sent their data. They sent their graphs. They sent graphs of what they were seeing in this new sewer monitoring. And of the 35 responses, now, this doesn't mean, of the 35 people who responded, 34 of those data sets those sewers were leaking. I mean, I didn't even do calculations. I can glance at a graph and say, oh my goodness. So inflow and or infiltration. Sometimes it was both, sometimes it was one. So I said, wow, we have a big problem in Ontario. What the heck? What's going on? And of course, I've been an I&I. I've been doing I&I, inflow and infiltration studies my entire career to trying to reduce this I&I. And now I find we're building sewers with I&I. So I kind of got excited about that. And so did a whole bunch more work. So the next question was why? So let me say one thing. When you're your sewer, it's at the joints, it's at connection of lateral to sewer, it's at the manhole, connection of sewer to manhole, it's at connection of property line. There's only 5 or 6 actual places, or a collapsed pipe, which is very unusual in a new sewer. So that's not rocket science. My question was, do we not have the proper safeguards in place? Why are all these leaks occurring? And I'll show you some pictures later because everybody likes pictures. So next question was, okay, we actually have performance specifications in Ontario for new sewers, and there's some required testing that needs to be done before a municipality accepts a new sewer. What I discovered was the required testing isn't being done by the majority of municipalities in Ontario. And the reasons are not simple. It's a complex situation. There's all kinds of competing interests here, and I'll try to explain that a little bit. You'll notice I never read my slides. I always forget which slide I'm even on. Anyhow, this is the results of just one test, and this test is leak testing of a new sewer. Now, that means we check new sewers from manhole to manhole, we fill them with water and make sure they're not leaking. Now, if you want to build a sewer system that's not leaking, it's a very, very good idea to do the required leak test on these sewers before you accept them. And yet, we weren't doing that. So by this time, I'm talking, I don't even know, I probably have 200 municipalities on the list right now. I'm not counting anymore. The point is we're not doing these tests. So this is one test. There are 7 tests I've identified that contribute directly, well, tests that if performed would reduce the risk of I&I or reduce I&I or eliminate I&I. 7 tests, and I have data on all 7 tests from 100 or 200 depending. And I'm going to show you that graph next. Now, I really nerded out as an engineer on this graph because you're not going to understand the graph anyway. So I'd like council, the mayor and council, I just want you to like unfocus your eyes a little bit. I'm going to show you a graph. And I just want you to, don't worry about this, about what's on the legends. Just unfocus your eyes and look at the bars. You should be seeing 7 green bars at 100%. These are mandatory tests that should be done for new sewers. Oh, I missed a slide. Hang on, let me go to that slide first. Okay, here's the test. These are required tests. They're on every single drawing set that gets tendered. We call them OPSBSD Standards. They're referenced continually. I've read them all cover to cover. I've gone back to all the original specifications, guidelines, standards from the US, whatever. These tests aren't being performed. So we already have some pretty decent testing requirements, and we're not doing them. So what the heck, like why? So, you know, I just was going to retire, but of course I couldn't. And these problems happen on the public side and the private side. Again, different jurisdictions, different acts under which they work. One's owned by the public, by individuals, and the other's owned by municipalities. Very complex. But the point is, we've got safeguards in place and we're not following them. And I'm telling you this for a reason. So it would be my observation that over the last 30 years or so, and I've been working for 31 years or whatever, it appears to me based on the data I see that sewers 30 years old are not performing any better, broad statement, than sewers that are 60 years old. So it would be my observation that we're not building sewers to last 75 years. Again, very broad general observation, not on your system, but in general. So I just want to point out that, okay, so what about the rest of Canada? I've talked about Ontario. How's everybody else doing? Nobody in Canada, you know this, you keep hearing this, you've heard this already at council, I'm sure. Nobody is replacing their infrastructure at the rate at which it needs to replace to be sustainable. Let me give you an example. If the average sewer lasts 50 years, that means that every year you need to replace 2% of your sewer system, 2% of all your sewers every year on a cycle, so that every 50 years you have a whole new system. When you replace a sanitary sewer, that is full reconstruction. That's full right of way, cut to past property line or past property line, majorly expensive to replace sewers. So nobody's doing it because, you know, tax dollars, I understand. I'm just telling you, nobody in Canada, well, I'm being a bit broad here, but I think I can probably say, anyway, that what this graphic is showing, I'm sure you've already looked at it, is 25% of municipalities in Canada, linear infrastructure, that means your pipes, is in poor, very poor, or fair condition. So I don't know what your particular numbers are, but this is a Canadian problem. And part of your I&I problem today probably has to do with this last 30 years. And the reason I say 30 years is I work with plumbers and building inspectors a lot, because I do work inside the house as well, or I consider what's going on inside the house. And they tell me that it seems like around 30 years ago, a bunch of things that used to happen, a bunch of quality checks, whatever, just started going away. I don't know what happened. I wasn't involved, but it seems to me that some of the problems we have today are just legacy problems from just what the industry, things were going on that the industry did not know. And I think I'm due for a break again. Let me see. Yeah, okay, so I'm into some Port Colborne details. So I'm gonna pause and give anybody a chance to ask any questions. How am I doing for time? I don't even have a clock. Just it's my phone. Doesn't matter. I'll keep talking until
You're good.
done,
Keep
and
going.
we can talk some more. What's that?
I said, you're good. Keep going.
Thank you very much. Sorry, I'm having a problem with my speaker. I can hardly hear you. You know how technology goes. Whatever, it's fine. I just have to lean to listen. All right. So now I'm going to talk a little bit about Port Colborne specifically. Now, let me tell you that I have only been working with Port Colborne for 6 weeks. So I really, I've talked to your staff quite a bit, whatever. I really don't feel comfortable making, well, I'm not drawing any conclusions by any stretch of the imagination, but so these are preliminary, the numbers are correct, but I'm not commenting in particular, just in general, about the kinds of things that are going on, that are probably going on in your system. So let's talk wastewater, billed wastewater versus wastewater costs. I understand this is, I didn't know this was how billing was done in Niagara until I started doing this work. And it's fine, you know, regions have got to find a way to bill equitably, and there's no easy way to do this. So it's not the region's fault, but I don't want to go into too much detail because I'm not sure I understand it completely. Let me just say that the difference between what you're billing your customers and what you're paying the region, there's a lot of things in there. And I said lost revenue, I should have said lost revenue mostly, because there's always going to be lost revenue in sewers. You're never going to collect every single meter cube of usage or whatever. But in the case of Niagara, firstly, or Port Colborne, I just mentioned lake levels are high. I have a cottage with a boathouse that used to be like on Georgian Bay. It used to be like, I don't know, 30, 40 feet from the bay, and now it's about 1.5 meters, and it keeps getting washed out. So lake levels are high. When your lake levels are high, your INI is going to be higher. We do not build sewers to be watertight. They're not water mains, they're sewers. So the sewers we construct below the groundwater table should actually be designed differently than those we construct above the groundwater table. And the new guidelines and standards I'm writing for Canada actually make that distinction and say, look, if you need to build below the groundwater table, that's fine. I need water main level tightness in those sewers to be sure the INI doesn't get in. No, I just made that recommendation the last couple of years. Nobody's been doing that. So over the years, we just built sewers underwater, and I don't know what we were thinking, but that's what we appeared to do. So the lake level is a huge thing here. I said metering inaccuracies. I actually mean two things. Firstly, I didn't have time to check all this, but you know, you always, whenever you look at metering, any kind of metering, you always want to check, when was that meter last calibrated? Was it cross-checked with something else? Was it cross-checked with whatever? So I don't quite know that. I know your staff are thinking about this kind of thing. Of course, we have rainy years in the spring. We all know about that. You do have INI, there's no question. So there's a gap there, and obviously we need to figure a way to close that gap. But yeah, ratepayers, they're struggling already financially. I understand that this is not an easy problem to face. But look, you're not facing it alone. I'm telling you, I work with a lot of municipalities, and I'm doing this kind of analysis a lot. And let me say one thing about your staff, and specifically Darlene. It's not very often that I start with a municipality on an INI study. Obviously, I have lots of experience, an INI program, I should say. I have lots of experience. You know, when I ask for basic engineering data, you know, show me a plot of your wastewater versus your water per year. I mean, it's not often the municipality just delivers that information off the top of their head, but Darlene's been thinking about this for a while, because every data set I asked her for, she provided immediately. So you've got good staff on your side, and that's worth a lot. So that's wastewater. Let's go to water, lost water. So obviously lost water is the difference between what you pay the region for the water and what you charge your customers based on your customers' water meters, right? So what you pay the region is based on the region's water meter. Like, I think, I don't know specifically for Colborne, but probably you pay the region based on the water meter at the regional plant. and you receive revenue based on the water meters inside people's houses. They're completely different metering systems. They should match, they normally match. There's always water loss. Your water loss is very high. And the reason I'm reluctant to draw any conclusions at this point is, you remember I showed you that pictograph of where the water main is located versus where the sewer is located. So you notice the water main is invariably, well, it's always higher. I think it's always higher than the sewer. So water main leaks get into the water main trench. Like there's gravel around the water main and there's gravel around the sewer. So I'm nerding out as an engineer again, but those trenches are interconnected. So it would be my observation that water main leaks are connected to can be connected to I&I. And let me give you an example. Just at the corner of my street and the poor municipality where I live, oh my gosh, because I see I&I everywhere and I see opportunities and I nag them incessantly. But anyway, the corner where I live, there's a storm sewer that crosses that corner and I walk across it sometimes 2 or 3 times a day. And that storm sewer is running when there is no rain. Now this drives me nuts because a storm sewer should be empty when there's no rain, because if you design it for a 5-year storm, it needs to be empty. So when a 5-year storm comes, there's room in the sewer. Remember that drawing or the sketch I showed you with the sewer with the sewage and that white and that blue slice? That is leakage. So if that water's in the sewer when it rains, the level of protection that storm sewer is providing is less. But anyway, sorry, water. So when you have a lot of lost water, you may be able to double your bang for the buck, because that lost water may be making its way into your sewers because of the connectivity of trenches. Oh, I was in the middle of telling the story. Oh, sorry. The storm sewer running that drives me crazy. Now, I'm also in a 2-tier municipality. Regional Waterloo runs the water system, and the guys were out fixing, obviously they shut down the road and they were digging things and they were fixing a water main. So of course I walk up and talk to them and I say, what are you guys doing? Was there a water main break? Which I didn't think there was because I didn't lose water at my house. Anyway, they said, no, this valve has been leaking for years. I said, oh, that's interesting. And that was not too far from that storm sewer. That water main was crossing the storm sewer, but trenches go along the water main, so, and the sewer and the storm sewer. So water can easily flow along a trench. After they fixed that, this is completely anecdotal, I have no data, but I think about sewers a lot. After they fixed that water main valve, I don't hear that storm sewer leaking in the dry anymore. So I suspect that treated potable water was getting into the sewer. So we're going to need to continue to look at lost water in Port Colborne, but I have a really good news story for you. Your staff are on it. I mean, your water loss is high. I meant to look it up, but off the top of my head, average water loss in Ontario is 13%. So you're high, but I like what I see. I like the fact that your staff have recognized water loss, and they're working on it. You know, continuing to reduce water loss is going to have to be part of your program, your I&I program, indeed, I think, because there's probably a connection. And we need to decide and you will find out that I really, really don't like to waste money. As a matter of fact, I wash my own milk bags, you know, the bags of milk, I like cut them and wash them out and use them for sandwich bags. That's like how I feel about spending money. So I&I dollars are very valuable, and I&I is very expensive. So we got to make sure we spend the money wisely, which is the whole premise of what I'm trying to do. Okay, so I'm up to I&I, I'm up to a little bit more detail about private side infiltration. So I'm going to pause for a second. I'm going to have a drink of water. Nobody jumping in? Are you guys asleep or no? Good. What is it? Okay, yeah. So next, so let's talk a little bit about the private side. I already told you half of the length of the sewer system of your wastewater collection system, which is partly owned by residents, half of that length is on the private side. Now, I have training on the building code as regards plumbing and sewage matters. Building inspectors tell me that they go into homes constantly where the plumbing has been rejigged in the basement. Frequently, residents will disconnect a sump pump and plumb that water directly into the sandy. I see this all the time because residents nobody likes sump pumps, especially if they run all the time. If they run all the time, you pretty much need a backup, because what if that guy fails? Nobody likes sump pumps. However, it's illegal to discharge that water into the sanitary sewer system. So there's lots of opportunity to be creative. Your building inspectors are already going into the homes. They know what the plumbing's supposed to look like. If they see plumbing that's illegal, because it is illegal per your sewer use bylaw, maybe there's an opportunity to start addressing that. Again, these are difficult decisions for a council to make. I'm not saying this is the right decision for you. I'm just giving you some food for thought about some of the things that we're going to need to look at to get on top of the cyanide. Yeah, that's good. So nobody in Canada is addressing I&I. Nobody's really got their head around I&I. Different municipalities have tried different things, but we're behind the 8 ball here, and it's changing quickly because I'm kind of pushing guys. They're ahead of us in the States for reasons that I don't need to go into, but everybody in Canada is saying, wait, we got to start looking at the private side as well. And this is difficult because your ratepayers, of course, own the sewers on the private side, and this isn't a good year to ask ratepayers to penny up. So again, I'm not saying this is an easy situation. I'm giving you the facts. So I think this is just a quote from one of my reports, whatever, so from some other jurisdiction. But, we need to, on private side, particularly inflow, you won't remember, but inflow is the flow we see after a rain. So it tends to be peaky, like it happens right away. So what I just said about some pumps some pumps collect foundation drains. That's not an immediate response. The water has to get down the basement wall, but sometimes it's immediate. I'm talking like an engineering. Let me just leave that. Everybody has private side I&I problems, and you're no different. Now, you're in a good situation in Niagara, though, because the region of Niagara have a sewer use bylaw that's quite enforceable. Most sewer use bylaws in Ontario actually have this wording because they were actually developed by the Ministry of Environment as models, and then most municipalities just adopted them as is. But the best thing about Niagara is you already have municipalities in Niagara who are enforcing various private side strategies to reduce those CSOs. We've got to get on those CSOs because they're discharges to the environment. They're not good. So you're in much better shape than, say, where I live. It's not even on anybody's radar screens. So to try and institute some kind of private side program here, and we don't have flooding, we're not on the lake. I mean, we have I&I, but so you've got something going for you there. There's another problem, though. You're in a 2-tier wastewater system, and there are lots like that in Canada. Well, Toronto, not Toronto, it used to be Peel, not Halton, Peel, whatever. Peel, York, both 2-tier. It's very difficult to operate in a 2-tier system because there's 2 different councils, different priorities of council, so just from a council point of view, from a decision-making point of view, it's difficult, but also from a data point of view, because each tier stores data, thinks about data, has different experts, whatever. Each tier is doing things its own way. And of course, everybody tries to get along, but there's intrinsically, it's already more complicated because you're in a 2-tier system. Ultimately, we need to pick the best, whether the solution to I&I is at the plant or in the system. I don't know right now, whatever. We need to work together to make sure we're using taxpayer dollars as efficiently as possible. So I don't have time to talk about the region's program too much, but I just wanted to mention that the region 10 years ago, which is very impressive because this isn't very common yet, it will be, it is in the States, established a fund where they would fund CSO I&I reduction programs put forward by local municipalities at whatever percentages. They started that 10 years ago. That's pretty impressive. It's a simple thing, but it works. Is it absolutely perfect? No, but let me tell you, I&I, there's no perfection in reducing I&I. It doesn't work like that. So it's a great program. So you're working with a region that is very interested in helping you, and it's a shared problem. Of course, the region is responsible to the regulator. The region is responsible to MECP. So, but the I&I occurs in the local municipality, just like everywhere else. So it's very difficult to deal with. But the region's doing a great job. And this is just a graphic about there's a lot of things going on here. Everybody has to work together. Developers, of course, that's when we talk about new construction. But there's and building officials. I'm trying to say private side, whatever. So I think I'm due for a break. And pause for a second. I'm getting the impression I'm just going to get through the slides and we'll talk after. Seeing nobody raise their hand. Sorry, I don't have everybody up here. Yeah, I'm good. Okay, so look, the region's doing a great job. I wanted to mention that I only thought of this today, but Niagara Region has been sponsoring Norton's research, and I'll just tell you at the end what my research has basically been what I've told you about for the last 6 years. I had no external funding, so various municipalities just threw money in a pot to support the research. The Niagara Region's been supporting me for 4 years, I think, through the CSO program, which means that Port Colborne has been supporting this research. So thank you. This has been very important. And I'm working with Niagara Region directly now on some of their policies and procedures and whatever. I haven't gotten to them yet, but I had to put you guys in the list because you were in a hurry. So anyway, everybody's doing the best they can to quickly sort of get a hold of this situation and get on top of it. All right, so here I'm going to nerd out and I'm not going to read this stuff, but I just wanted to mention, I mentioned before, most of the problems I see with I&I are not engineering problems, they're political problems, they're problems with staffing and silos, and there's a lot of different things going on, but it's not necessarily an engineering problem. When an inspector on site isn't enforcing required standards, guidelines, and testing, for example, I mentioned testing, what's happening with that inspector on site? Why isn't he forcing the contractor to do the testing? Typically our inspectors, well, there's all kinds of situations, but inspectors don't tend to have a lot of power, and developers, although not contractors, tend to have a lot of power. So if you're a junior inspector inspecting sewers and you see something a little off, I mean, the kind of thing that I would call a contractor on, the average inspector, he can't. Well, he doesn't have the experience for one thing, and he doesn't have the cred to be able to do it. So things like that are affecting what goes on. And I know you're not dealing with new sewers, but there's a picture of I&I in new sewer. So that's what I was talking about when I say 1 liter per second. So that flows probably 0.8 liters per second. I just do them by eye now. That's one joint, right? So we'll run a camera down a sewer and we see that at every single joint. So there's money in them, there are hills to be had. So that's public side. Okay, private side. So the private side, building officials didn't even know about I&I on the private side at all until I started going to their conferences like 5 years ago. So, it's not even on building officials' radar screen. The building code was built to prevent catastrophic failure, which indeed a flood is. However, the building code was designed around fire code and structural integrity, that kind of thing. Back then, when it was developed, like 70 years ago, the pipes weren't on anybody's radar screen. Even in the engineering world, we were never talking about I&I until recently. So it just wasn't set up to protect this plumbing and protect this piping. So again, education is needed for building inspectors who want to do the best job they can, but don't always have the information they need to do their job. So that's part of what I do. All right, so I've talked a lot about my research. So obviously I've been doing this for a while. And I'm back to new subdivisions, but this is important because it relates directly to the I&I you see in your system now. So we're now the new MECP standards for pre-approval that are going to be dropped in the fall. We're going to require that we flow monitor all new subdivisions. That's going to solve all those testing problems. We have a performance-based standard. We have testing. We have allowable leakage. I'm just saying, never mind what the contractor does on site. We're going to test allowable leakage when he wants us to assume the sewer. And if it's leaking more than allowable, we will reject this sewer. So very simple way to prevent the kinds of problems that have been piling up for the last 30 years from continuing. So we're kind of not quite there yet, but we're pretty close. So the new subdivision leakage is going to have to stop. So it's not going to be old sewer leakage 30 years from now when our colleagues are doing what we're trying to do right now. So that's great. However, we need a better way. We need to do better than we've done in the past with I&I studies. And I have done many I&I studies, and it's complicated to explain why, but in order to write an RFP for a consultant to do an I&I study, you have to understand what is required. And to understand what is required actually requires a lot of thinking and on the part of your staff or somebody to help them, like I've been helping your staff a little bit lately, to write an RFP that reflects the needs of your particular system. And nobody really has that before they issue an RFP. So we're wasting a lot of money on a lot of studies, and many I&I studies result in nothing. Like we don't actually find you know, things that we can do. We'll report, oh, this drainage area has high I&I or this one, whatever, but we don't actually have a solution to the I&I. And so we need to get away from that. We're wasting a lot of money on these studies. We need to actually reduce the I&I in an efficient and cost-effective manner. And I mentioned that before with that curve, right? We're going to go along the curve until we get somewhere in the sweet spot, and I don't know where that is. And then that's just going to be the I&I we have to live with. Trust me, you got a long way to go before you get to the sweet spot. If you're anything like most of the people I work with, that's fine. But you're going to get to a point where it's infeasible, from my point of view, to continue to try and reduce I&I in your system. Maybe we have to look at the plant at that point. One of the things that makes this difficult is, I think I mentioned before, I&I is not very sexy. I&I is sewers. I mean, everybody except me cringes about sewers. So it's not a sexy way to spend money. It's hard to put money towards I&I programs, but we don't have a choice anymore. And I'm getting away from the I&I study, the one-off. We'll hire a consultant to come in for a year and do a study and give us a report. It's not working. I&I is way more complex than a study. We need operations, we need bylaw, we need the building guys, we need the region. A whole bunch of things have to come together. And I'm not saying consultants can't do that; they can, but we're not retaining consultants in a way that makes that easy. We don't have enough flexibility. I&I, you get going and you find something different than you expected, and you go on a different tangent. It's just not. It's not engineering. It's an art. Reducing I&I is an art. It really is. It's well, I think I've made my point. Okay, so. Oh yeah, so sorry, there's a national standard that I just wrote. It drops in March. It's 80 pages of how to develop an I&I, an efficient, cost-effective I&I reduction program. I'm going to ask a lot of you. Let me say I've been working in Woolwich, which is in the region of Waterloo, for 20 years. So I've been their I&I engineer for 20 years. I'm essentially a staff member on this. 20 years ago, the wet weather peaking factor at the Elmira Wastewater Treatment Plant was 10. So the flows increased by a factor of 10 when it rained. Now it's about, I forget, 3.5, 4, whatever, way lower. That was 20 years of us trying different things, piloting this, doing that, trying this, just doing whatever we could. And I'm essentially graduating Woolwich from an active I&I program now. I mean, we found all the stuff that's economically feasible to remove. I've done pilot projects to try different things, but the cost benefit is just not feasible. And so we threw it back to the plant and said, you know what, based on the profile of this I&I, we think an equalization, that's too technical. Anyways, you'll get to the point where you've removed all the I&I and you've got careful procedures for new pipes and new developments. You don't get new I&I, but there's going to be a point where you can't continue. All I can tell you is you're not near that point right now, and I don't know how close you are, but you're going to need to support your staff. You might need more staff. Off the top of my head, I don't think you have enough staff working on this, but again, I don't know. But it's not fair to get mad at the engineering departments because, I'm working with a lot of people right now, and, it's not their fault that there's I&I. Let's just say it is what it is. Here we are today. We've got some I&I. All right. We got lots of tools and strategies, whatever. It's going to take time, patience. And I'm just recommending that we consider what needs to be done here. This is no small task, but it's an achievable task. And you know what, if we work, it doesn't have to be me. I might retire by then, but there's going to be a point where I or someone else will say to the ministry or the region or whatever, we're done. Like we can't do any more. We need to continue to monitor, but we can't do any more capital works, or at least not right now. So that's the goal, but we're not getting there this year. I'll just tell you that. So, all right, what's next for you guys? So again, I'm not going to be too specific. Staff and I have talked about more than this, but so you've applied for funding under that CSO program that I mentioned, which is great. I helped your staff a little bit with that. I wasn't able to help as much as I wanted to. And I recommend that your staff grab this latest guideline. It lays out all the different things that you can and should do, whatever, with all kinds of strategies. There's all kinds of stuff out there, but it's got to be an I&I reduction program, and it's going to take years. I'm telling you, it's going to take years. We may decide after 3 years, due to Lake Erie, there's nothing we can do. I doubt it. There's probably is stuff we can do, but I don't know right now. So following, developing a program, that's when the budget requests happen, requests to, fund certain programs or certain pilot projects or certain capital projects. And those budget requests are going to come every year. You're going to get budget requests for I&I. And I'm going to ask you as a council to carefully consider the impact of not dealing with this I&I. Understanding is an enormously difficult thing to deal with. I don't envy you your situation, but hey, I'm just the technical guy, and we'll go from there. So so here's all. So these are 6 guidelines that I've written in the last 5 years. They're all free, available, all the detail, all the different things that happen on public and private side. All of it is all available for free on my website. The 2021 guideline I just wrote is coming out in March. That'll lay out how to do a program in an existing system. And so you have what you need, but you're going to need, your staff is going to need money and support, and public education is going to be essential. So there's a lot of things we need to consider. So I think I'm wrapping up. Yeah, there you go. Questions. So how was that?
Very good, thank you. That was good. Can you put everybody across?
If I can fix this microphone thing, it's bugging me.
Oh, Barb, if you can take off your presentation, then I can see all my counselors.
Oh, of course, yeah.
Perfect. Then it's easier for me to see who's got questions. Council, just raise your hand. I'll start with Councillor Bruno, and then Councillor Wells, Councillor Clayliff, Councillor Danch.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Barbara, I don't really think you did get to my point later on in your presentation about not being behind the 8 ball. And the reason I say that is not because of the engineering side of it. And this is a bit unfair, but there is a crossover point if you can bear with me. 2 things. One is I have no doubt in everything you've said in how infiltration can happen and how it can happen across the board and where we are vis-a-vis other municipalities. But the one thing that you did mention was, that sort of lack of infrastructure spending, the sort of 50-year example, right? The 50-year pipe, right? Spend 2% a year, life cycle, and the world's round if all things are being equal and the new pipe is tight. Having said that, though, my preponderance is to think that the new pipe has a better chance of not leaking than the 80-year-old pipe, not the 50-year-old pipe in our case. And so at the end of the day, if you're not doing any sewer replacement, sanitary, then you're not getting close to 2%. You're at 0. Ergo, the problem is, to me, and I agree with you, not needing all of the technical, get at it. Do the rain leaders, do some low-hanging fruit if there is any to be found. But what you're going to come back with, is it going to be a combination of the financial and the engineering? In other words, spend this much. These are your low-hanging fruits that I've seen. This is the ones you might want to tackle first. Is that going to be the evolution of what you're going to bring back?
Yes, I think so. I'm new to your staff and they're new to me, so I don't like to speak on their behalf. I'm working for your staff.
Okay.
We've already discussed some strategies, and we've applied for the funding. Port Colborne has applied for the funding from Niagara. That's the immediate low-hanging fruit that we came up with rather quickly, but it definitely needs to be done. Yeah, we're going to make budget asks for the things we can do this year, but what I'm trying to say is these budget asks are just going to keep coming, and Staff need the support of council to actually fund the I&I program. So I don't know, And you guys aren't alone. You know, sewers never get funded. I always complain. In fact, in media, I think you gathered, I do a lot of media with my MPs and MPPs, all of them. Whenever anybody talks about infrastructure funding, they always talk about bridges and roads. And I'm beating to death into people that bridges, roads, and sewers. You know, well, there's lots of stuff, but sewers need to be in that equation. So I hear MPs now or MPPs sometimes mention sewers, and it warms the cockles of my heart. So. Yeah, we're going to be making budget asks. What I'm trying to say is I don't want to rush an I&I study at you. I mean, you can do whatever you want. I'm just consulting with your team, but I don't want to, we can't do an I&I study today because I don't understand enough where the low-hanging fruit is. So we need to take some time. So, you know, we're going to do some budget asks. I don't know. I'm not doing your budget. I'm your engineering consultant, so I can't quite answer that.
I've got two more things. We have spent some money on a sanitary in a section of the city. My concern is that I don't know if they did have an I&I study before, but and this is where I think the practicality of your approach comes in. So we do an area of the city and there's not a discernible change. So as you recorded, you know, Lake Erie's gone up in that time. A whole bunch of pipes that weren't leaking have got older. And while you're fixing A, B is starting to leak more and more. From your practical approach of stopping the water coming in, I guess what I'd like to see is the short-term, medium, and long-term. So, you know, if you have 3 people going out disconnecting, you know, rain leaders and having a bylaw that says it's this, you know, that's $300 a throw, right? And so you can do some things, start seeing if it has an effect. I don't want to wait till the end of the study and the next sewer.
Oh, no.
Okay,
No.
so that's point 1. Point 2 is when you said that, I just lost my train of thought. Hang on a second.
I'll just assure
You know what?
that I'm
Why don't you
person.
circle back to me? I've got one more. Thanks.
Okay.
Okay. Do you want to answer what he's asked, Barbara, so far?
Sorry, did I?
Short term, medium term.
Absolutely. But I'm just telling you, you have to be patient. So I'm the national expert on I&I. I have undertaken I&I reduction studies in a certain area, not studies, capital programs in certain areas where they didn't work. Like we had all the right information, we did all the research, but sometimes stuff happens. I don't know if I mentioned in the presentation, I've done a lot of pilot programs in my career, a lot. In fact, I had asked Niagara to fund a few pilot programs. So, you know, my approach is more, instead of trying to understand everything about your I&I across the whole city, let's pick the worst area and drill down really quickly and start fixing. Let's start fixing. I don't like to study. Well, we have to study, but we got to fix. We got to get on it.
Good.
That's my approach. But you know, I don't work for you exactly. So
Good.
Anyway.
I just thought of the second one. The second one is you mentioned, although you're the wastewater expert here in sewer, and we're concentrating on wastewater in this presentation, you also talked about the correlation with water. So I'd like your take on this. Is in my belief is having the water rate flow, if you will, volumetric, tied to the capital portion of the money we raise for wastewater. So maybe a little bit more clearly, right? You use more water, we get more wastewater money because the two are meshed together. And in our case, at 100%, not at like the 92% or something that's supposed to go back into the sewer. So I'm a proponent that we roll the dice every year, that, right? If it's a rainy year and the sewers are leaking, I'm also not watering my grass. So I've dropped, right? I'm not using any more water. I'm actually using less maybe water than a normal year. I'm actually getting more water in my wastewater system. And so at the end of the day, I don't think the two have to be linked. I think you can have a water rate based on fixed and flow, but I think you've got enough data on wastewater and what you kind of need to collect every year to perhaps push that 50-50 to 75-25 fixed versus flow, which is only related to water, to the gamut. You know, maybe it's to 100% fixed on wastewater to bring some certainty to your revenue to fund that capital. And I know that's getting into the financial side of things.
I
but
can't
what's
speak
your
about
take
that.
on
I can help your staff make
municipalities
decisions.
that have used different variations of waste to fix to volumetric and tying it to water?
Right. If I could just make a comment on fixed and variable costs on a repairs bill, I don't see that very often. You know, the wastewater you generate should exactly map the treated water that you use, because the wastewater you generate is just whatever you're discharging into your sewers in your house, which comes from your potable water system. So in a typical wastewater profile, I will see with a decent I&I situation, like normal I&I. In the spring, the wastewater will be higher than the water because of spring freshet and sewers leak more in the spring. And then in the summer, the water will be less than the wastewater because of lawn watering, because a lot of water gets lost outside evaporation. Now, depending on the community, because where I work in St. Jacobs, it's a Mennonite community. They don't water lawns, so I don't see that. You know, I always have to think about the circumstances. So yeah, there's lots of comparisons to be drawn for sure. Geez, I just lost my train of thought for a second. Water, wastewater.
Well, should we be tying these rates so inextricably tight to each other, which to me has caused this in our revenue for wastewater? I mean, obviously the wastewater flows are what really throws it off.
Right.
But if you're depending on 50% of your funding for wastewater being tied to the amount of water you use, I mean, your scenario is right, but it's also the perfect world. And of course, the world isn't.
No, absolutely not. An I for sure. So in the region of Waterloo, let me just mention, because 60% of our potable water is groundwater sourced, and it's a limited resource. So we've been at water use reduction in the region of Waterloo for a long time. So now water use is getting so low, the revenues are dropping because
Exactly.
your sewage, you bill your sewage based on your water meters,
Yes.
right? So it's directly connected. Oh, everybody's having the same problem. And not only that, I didn't get into this, but the fact that we're using so little water in new construction means that we're seeing blockages in pipes. There's not enough water to push the solids along. So that's another whole problem, but that's a different problem than the stuff we're talking about today. So perhaps I'll take a question from another councillor or whatever.
Thank you, Your Worship. Through you to Barbara. Great presentation, Barbara, on I&I. You had identified in some of the video shots that you're using an internal camera to inspect some of the leaks and find the leaks. Are there other techniques or other testing methods that you use to identify leaks other than just a video camera inside the larger diameter piping?
Are you talking about existing sewers?
Yes.
So CCTV inspection, which is that camera inspection, is very common, a very common way to identify I&I. Typically, what I recommend and what you'll probably end up doing is you find small drainage areas, small enough that you can cope with, you can see the nuances in flow, so you can understand the flow profile enough to actually understand what kind of solutions might solve the problem, if that's a bit technical. But so yeah, CCTV, smoke and dye testing is very popular for cross connections. So a cross connection would be, and this would be inflow, when a storm catch basin lead is connected to your sanitary sewer. It's very common. Hard to detect. You can see it on a camera, but you have to camera when it rains to see it flowing. Like, these are complicated things. None of this is easy. But so smoke and dye testing, what we do for smoke testing is you block manhole to manhole. So you have a guy in each manhole, you plug them, and you force smoke into the sewer between the two manholes. And that smoke forces its way up the laterals to the house, and also through, if there's any connection to the storm system, that smoke will start coming out of a storm catch basin. And then we know that catch basin is hydraulically connected to the sanitary sewer, we can disconnect. But it also tells us if roof leaders are connected, we see smoke coming out of remember that stack I told you about that's the vent? When I force smoke into the sanitary sewer, it forces that smoke up the lateral through your plumbing and out through the stack, and I can see the smoke. So yeah, there's lots of techniques. My main premise though in these guidelines is field work is very expensive. Smoke testing, dyes testing, CCTV, flow monitoring, it's all very expensive. And it would be my observation that municipalities are rushing out. They want to deal with I&I, so they immediately start doing all this field investigation. Well, that stuff's expensive. It's much cheaper to look at the data like Darlene has been doing, and I can help you guys with. It's much cheaper to look at the data and really, pare down where the areas are. Like, we need low-hanging fruit. So I want to find areas that we can fix quick. No, not fix carefully, but immediately. I'm not much for studies. Let's get out there and let's fix some sewers and get this I&I down for your ratepayers.
Harry?
Thanks, Barbara. I have one other follow-up question.
Yeah.
Along with the testing is the repairing. Other than having to dig up a joint or anything like that, are there other techniques in regards to repairing the pipe in situ without having to go to the large excavation type of repairs?
Totally. Yep. So it's called trenchless technology. So from the surface. So for example, a sanitary sewer, it's maybe 3 meters down, say. So we have something called lining, CIPP, CIPP. No, it's not cast in place. Anyways, it's white. It's rolled into a U shape. It's called a U lining actually, and it's like it's going to be a fabric. It's impregnated fabric. It's impregnated with a bond, an adhesive bond, and we drag that impregnated fabric, which is folded up from one manhole to the other, and then we force water or steam into that, and it pops open and it seals itself to the sewer and blocks all. And then we have to go through and cut all the holes for the laterals, and that will, if you have a lot of defects in a run, that's a good solution. However, it doesn't provide structural integrity. So if your problem is a structural problem, you're looking at digging it up. But no, normally, but the only problem with repairs like that is they don't last. So spot repairs, in my experience, last about 10 years. So that's why I want these new sewers to be built properly, because even so, when we find defects in new sewers, the contractors go out and spot repair. It's like, I don't want a spot repaired sewer. I want a new sewer, because spot repaired sewer is nothing like a new sewer. So, but yes, there are absolutely trenchless techniques. We'd always look at those first, obviously, for cost, if for no other reason. Just they're not quite as reliable as full reconstruction. But full reconstruction costs you a pretty penny. So,
Harry?
Thank you.
All set? Councillor Claylift and Councillor Danch.
Thank you very much, Barb. Lots of good information. Learned a lot. I have a question. I've been told that it's living in Port Colborne is like living in Atlantis, basically because of the elevation and living on the lake. We've got lots of lake water going in that we're cleaning all the time. I live close to the canal. On the storm sewer runs down the middle of our front street during a bad storm. Lots of people are having their sump pumps overflowing, basement flooding, different things happening. Is there infiltration? Obviously, there must be from the storm sewer as well into the sanitary system. Because I've looked at some of the different storm sewers. I've seen some of the camera shots of them, and they are broken, need replacing technically. So if we're putting out, I've been told that for every liter we bring in clean, that we're sending back 2 liters to be through the sanitary system to be cleaned up. Mm-hmm. So, that's 2 to 1. And I hear what you're saying. Is it possible for us to ever get to that point where we can get 1 to 1, where we can get it down because of the lake, because of what's going on? Are we the only municipality in the region that has this much of a difference in what we're coming out and what we're putting back? Do you know that?
Right. Yeah, so I can't speak too much about the way the region, and I meant to call them today to just be sure, because I think I know, but I don't want to say. So there's the way you're billed for wastewater is not directly related. It doesn't appear to be directly related exactly to what you're sending to the plant. So that's tough. Remember that cross section I showed you about, I mentioned particularly the water main was above the Sani, and so if
Right.
the water main leaks, it might get into Sani. Same with
That's-
storm.
That's what I
Same
was
with
thinking.
storm.
Same with storm.
And
Okay.
all these pipe problems I was talking about Sani, people are ignoring storm. No one's even touching. I'm the only one who's even saying, wait a second, we have the same problem in storm. They're not, if you think they're not leak testing sanitary sewers, contractors tell me, oh, it's storm sewers, it's just clean water anyway, we don't care. That's not true. Storm sewers provide a level of service. And so I don't know if you guys know this, sorry, this has nothing to do with sanitary sewers, but a 5-year storm sewer is designed to convey, meaning, convey inside the pipe, a 1 in 5 year storm, a storm that happens on average once every 5 years. Beyond a 5-year storm, the storm sewer is designed to flow along your gutters. The gutters in your road are there. That's called your major system. So beyond a 5-year storm, it flows through the gutters. And there's a triangle there. Then we calculate the volume of that triangle so we can send flow through there. And eventually we decide how much we can put up with that before it's a 100-year storm, and we do other things with a very large storm. So when storm sewers leak, we're not providing that level of protection. Now, perhaps it doesn't matter if we have flooding, street flooding more often, but if we're designing a storm for 5 years, we should be building a 5-year storm and not a 2-year storm pipe. That's maybe a bit technical, but did you understand that, Councillor Keeley?
No, I did. Actually, that makes perfect sense to me, because
Okay,
we've had such severe storms these past few years, and that's exactly what's happening. The storm sewers are full and over capacity, and I think that it's infiltrating. And I look at our storm sewers and how bad they are, and we know they are. We know that they're broken all along West Street and everywhere else, which I'm sure that Darlene's talked to you about. And I'm looking at it and saying it's not just our sewage system. We've got the whole ball game here to look at. And I guess I just kind of wonder, and I agree with you, start picking away piece by piece, but and like you, I think, can we ever really fix it all? Because, you just fix it, and these continual storms that we have and all the different things that happen, how good is the best that we're ever going to get? What do you think?
And again, this I can't tell you. Remember, I showed you the curve. We're going to go up that curve until we get to the top somehow. I don't know what that looks like. I can't even tell you. I have no idea. I don't know how long, how much money today. I can't tell you that. But I know, just based on the fact that I don't think you've had a chance to really have a sort of comprehensive I&I plan in the last little while. I just know from experience that doubtless there's a lot on the easy part of that curve that can be done. And you're going to get to the point where, like I said with Woolwich, I will tell the ministry on your behalf, if it comes to that, like, okay, we've
done it all.
Everything we can. We can't spend $10 million fixing, 10 feet of sewer. We just can't. It's not feasible. So, and the sweet spot for I&I for each municipality is going to be different depending on your circumstances. There is no national sweet spot. I just wrote the guideline. No sweet spot. For each municipality is going to have to decide based on their combination of circumstances, budget. I mean, let's face it, if you do not have the money, we can't fix the sewers. And it's a tough situation. But again, I keep telling you, you're not alone. You really aren't. I know it feels like it.
Thank you.
Okay.
Councillor Danch.
How are you? Very informative. Through you, Mr. Mayor, to the presenter. A couple questions on your presentation.
Yeah.
The pipe that's going through your roof, that's your vent for your home.
Yep.
That's a piece of ABS pipe. That's not a piece of PVC pipe.
Oh, sorry, whatever. I don't do plumbing. I do sewers, but whatever. It doesn't matter. It's
plumbing is plumbing, and the proper pipe is the proper pipe.
Yeah, but I don't, sorry, I'm not a plumbing expert. So yeah, I made my point that it's a vent. So what the material it's made of is not really germane, I don't think. Anyway, carry on, Councillor Dench.
You're talking about these rats coming up your lateral. Does a backflow preventer not stop something like that?
Your backflow preventer is normally open. It only closes when there's a flood. And it's not called a backflow preventer, it's called a backwater valve is the correct term. It's a backflow prevention is on the water system. It's called a backwater valve. It has to be normally open because of that venting I told you about. You can't have a backwater valve closed because the sewer has to vent. If the backwater valve was closed, it couldn't vent through the ABS pipe or whatever you said it was coming out of the roof. So no, that will not prevent rats coming out. I mean, that's not very common. It's just, Google it. They had a infestation in Scarborough a few years ago or this year. I don't know. I always hear about rats in sewers. So it's just an interesting fact. I was trying to make things a little entertaining for council because I thought this information might be a little bit dry.
I don't find rats entertaining, but anyways.
Well, when you're presenting, you can do your best, Councillor Dent.
So you're talking about water flowing on the storm sewers and stuff like that. So I walk down the one street in town where I know we've had some problems, and I can hear water rushing any time of the day. Is that an indication of some leakage that's there, or?
I have no idea. Depends what kind of sewer it is and what its function is. If it's a sandy, it should be flowing. If it's storm, maybe not. I have no idea.
Well, it would be a storm sewer. That's why I'm wondering, like you're saying, like, you know, it's flowing all the time, and you go by it and you think, oh, geez, it hasn't rained in forever. And like, why is this going on? So that would probably be an indication of a leak that's in the area.
Or high groundwater that's getting, there's a defect in the storm sewer. So yes, storm sewers really shouldn't flow unless it's raining. They're designed to convey rainfall. So yeah, if storm sewers are flowing during dry weather, you know, that might be a place that we can start. So I can certainly talk to staff about what information we have about that. You know, however, a leaking storm sewer is probably not as problematic as a leaking sandy. That's the only thing. A leaking storm sewer is going to cause you inconvenience with additional, the water's going to be on your road sooner than it otherwise would be, but mostly that water is just going to get to the lake. So again, from a cost benefit point of view, if we're short of dough, I'm not sure. Again, I don't know enough about your system, but Sandy is discharging because the stormwater in Sandy results in discharge of wastewater to the environment, whereas the stormwater in a storm sewer is just stormwater. It's still got heavy metals in it, but it's not as egregious a difficulty. So again, I'm trying to say we need to look at all your infrastructure as a unit and optimize the best bang for the buck in terms of dollars spent. So
you were speaking about the sump pump connections and that last couple of years there, we've done some huge dollar work on the east side of Port Colborne, looking into the sump pump connections and stuff like that. I think the city's kind of gotten ahead of themselves, and they've done a good job with the water department trying to get rid of some of the illegal connections in that part of town. A lot of time was spent, a lot of inconvenience for the people that lived in the area. So on that side of the coin, I think we've started the ball rolling there. We're not sitting back waiting. Don't matter what ward a councillor is, I think we're all looking after the city, and I think that was a real positive note that we had done, and I know Darlene was a big part of that.
Yeah, you guys have done great work. I'm telling you, everything I see looks great. It's just there's a lot more to do. That's all. It's not that anything you've done isn't good enough. I just, your staff need help. They need some direction and some budget dollars so they can tackle some of these things. Would be my observation, but again, I'm pretty new here, so.
Okay, good for me. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Dent. Councillor Beauregard.
Through your worship to the presenter, through your experience, what's the proportion of leaks that are the result of I&I happening on the private side?
50%.
50%. So that's definitely
across North America. 50%. Yep.
Okay. And then my second question is just when you're finished working here for the city of Port Colborne, what can we expect to be left with? Like, what's the final product?
I don't know. I just started 6 weeks ago. I barely have a work plan. I'm helping your staff with budget. We need to work out, and I don't do I&I studies like entire programs myself. I do high level policy stuff, so I can help with be a guide or a senior partner. But I'm not angling for work here because I don't actually do I can, but it's not the best use of my time. So yes, work plans will have to be developed, and plans and strategies, and all will have to be, and it has to be priced. So the bang for the buck that you're getting, that we're going to do our best. That all has to be worked out. It's just we're not there yet, unfortunately. I know you're anxious for an answer, and I'm sorry I didn't have an answer. I like answers too, but I don't give answers unless I'm ready, and I'm not ready. So
no, that's fine. I just want to know if we'll be left with any policies or guidelines or something that will really help us in the future when you're not really doing stuff anymore right now, but something that we can be left with that can be almost like a master plan or plan of some sort dealing with this particular type of infrastructure. That's all.
Absolutely. So the guideline I just wrote is how to develop. I just told you is how to develop this I&I program. It's just there's a lot of it's typically staff need a little bit of help to understand some of the opportunities available to them. But all my stuff's published. It's all on my website. It's all free. So you don't. Well, you might like to have me around, but all the stuff, all my findings are all free for your staff to look at. So, yeah, I'm not going anywhere. Just I don't have. I can't. You guys are gonna have to fight for my time at this point, but that's okay.
That's good. Any further questions, councillors? Okay, thank you. Barbara, thank you. But before you leave, I'm going to go back to Mr. Bowles. Do you or your staff have any further comments or anything for council?
Through the mayor to council, I just want to thank everybody for the opportunity that we were able to bring our presenter today to talk about I&I. I think council has the heads up going into the budgetary process in a couple of weeks for water and wastewater that with the amount of work that's happened in recent years, the water budget that we're preparing is seeing improvement. The wastewater budget, we're probably going to have a lot of discussions about it. I&I is a major component about it, and that's why we've had our presenter here to talk and really talk about I&I in the city. I hope some of the terminology that we walked through and some of the causes of it is a good support for council. I think to put it into context, Public Works is working with our presenter to help identify the process and put together our RFP work that we can bring in some people and develop a plan for some quick wins. And as we move forward, we'll be there to talk to council about how that progresses. But I think even just to set expectations for the next 2 weeks when we send out the budget document and we meet in about 3 weeks, some of those plans still will not be ironed out, but the budgetary figures to allow us to fund some of those plans will be included in the budget. And Barbara and Public Works will continue to provide updates to City Council on progress with that they can make throughout the course of the year. So to Council, we really do appreciate for the time. And if there are any questions to me, we also have the Director of Public Works and his team here tonight that could certainly answer any questions that council may have.
Thanks, Brian. Yeah, Chris, Steve, and Darlene are here, as well as the CAO. So, any questions to staff, or I think probably best to wait till the actual rate report comes to us, and that's where they're going to get to be front and center instead of Barbara with all this. But it's true what. I know Councillor Danch, who's been around a while, and what Barbara said about what we've been doing here. And I go back to the days where we took Westport Gardens across from the old West Arena and went in there and tackled the stormwater into the sanitary, and it helped a lot. So those programs across the city that have been continuing do help us. We know that. I do believe that the team we have here will tackle this very well. Barbara, we do thank you for your work and your help on this, and more guidance than help on this with your expertise. So, and I know Chris, coming from his former position, has got some good background in this also. So I'm sure you know him from his previous job. Maybe I'm sure you've run into him. I don't know.
Yeah, we have run in somewhere. I think I was some for you. I don't know. Yeah, I've been in a meeting with him. I've presented in front of him before, but it was some time ago, so I can never remember. I do a lot of presentations.
So I can say that this council is waiting with bated breath as far as Brian and his staff are going to present this budget. And I've gone through this at the region where we've just done our 10-year planning for our water and wastewater budgets, and a lot of people didn't like what was going on. But again, it was lack of spending, and at that point, it's a lot to do with plants more than just pipes in the ground. So we are seeing the fruits of our labor, especially on the clean water side, and the staff has done a good job with that. And now we're tackling the sanitary side. So moving forward, it'll just be better for the ratepayer in the long run. So unfortunately, it's slow and steady, but at some point, you just can't race into this stuff, as you mentioned, because you just might be throwing good money after bad. So With that being said, Chris, do you have anything to add? Do you and your staff have anything to add, or you're all set until the next meeting?
Excuse me. Sorry, I shouldn't repeat myself.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, not much to add, just to echo some of the points that Director Bowles made, and thank Barbara for coming and her expertise. I've been involved with Inflow and Infiltration for approximately 19 years now through 6 municipalities. So I do understand that it is a wide-ranging, very complex issue that does need some planning, and there's a lot of options that we'll be getting to specifically for Port Colborne, and do a specific made in Port Colborne plan and execute that. So just wanted to thank Barbara again for her expertise. I have worked with her way back in York Region a long time ago. And again, I will be with Director Bowles presenting the budget, and if there are any additional questions that council has at that time, I'll be happy to answer them then.
Great, thanks, Chris. Appreciate it. Mark?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Through you, Director Bowles talked about a budgetary request coming in, but will we also get a report on what progress was made in the year 2020? What did we do last year to improve our water, wastewater? I like to hear what we actually did last year, and it's already second month of the year already, and the plan going forward, generalities don't really count, but especially for last year, I want to know what we did last year. And former director talked about a lot of things, like connecting up the city, doing the actual connections from new housing rather than the contractor doing the connection, just to make sure the connection was done properly and to spec. And this is stuff I want to hear coming forward. I just don't want to hear a dollar sign coming forward in March, Mr. Mayor.
Yeah, Mr. Bowles?
That's all. Thank you.
Mr. Bowles?
Yeah, through the mayor to council, for definitely the report coming forward actually shows budget to actual comparisons back to 2016 to give you a full sense of how the system has progressed over the last number of years. And it will also indicate the amount of capital work that was done. And one of the reasons we had tonight's presentation was to also weigh some of the questions that council may have. And we will specifically highlight that in the report to which capital work has been done. So that way council can be made aware and which capital work is being carried forward into the 2021 year.
Counselor?
Thank you very much, Mr. Mayor.
Good, thank you. Okay, just before we go, if I can have Councillors Bruno and Beauregard move to receive the presentation. Any further questions? Seeing none, all in favor raise a hand. That's great, that's carried. Okay, again, Barbara, thank you. Staff, we really appreciate this, and we're looking forward to the water, wastewater budget meeting. I'll now adjourn this meeting. Thank you.